The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ian Robson, and I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Salesforce in the UK. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this fourth webinar in our series on implementation expertise. In a couple of moments, I'll hand you over to our partner, Cloudsense, who will be presenting today's webinar on Force.com, when, why, and how. Just before I do that, I'd like to cover a couple of quick points. Firstly, to enable you to participate fully in this webinar series, I'd like to direct you to our online community on success.salesforce.com. Please take a moment to search for and join the group UKI Implementation Expertise Webinar. You can find full details and a link in your webinar confirmation email. This group is used for a variety of purposes, including communicating future webinars, providing details of how to register for these webinars, and crucially, acting as a repository for collateral, including the webinar recordings and slide decks that are used to support these webinars. It's also the place where we will ask and answer questions during the final session of this webinar. We'd also love to hear your feedback on these webinars, if they provide value, if you enjoy the content, if there are other topics you'd like us to cover. So please, if you have thoughts in that area, post them into the community. With that, I hope you find the webinar valuable, and we'll get started on the main content now. Thank you for joining us, and Fozzie, over to you.
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Fauzi Faris. I'm Director of Enterprise Solutions at Cloudsense, and together with my co-founder, Davor Dubokovic, we present to you today on Force.com, best practices, and give you a brief overview of a real-life project that used the platform to deliver the processes they required. But before we start, let's take a quick look at the Salesforce One platform and what it provides us out of the box as out-of-the-box services. Salesforce provides us with a set of applications. As you can see there in the diagram, we've got Marketing Cloud, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and not to forget the collaboration tools of Chatter, which is a really, really useful collaboration set of tools that the platform provides as well. In addition, Salesforce also provides an online marketplace to deliver configurable applications that you can just simply download from the Appexchange and deliver into your platform. Some are free, some are paid for. As you will see later, Cloudsense has some very innovative offerings on the Appexchange as well that will help you extend the reach of the platform and your investment in the platform. But we'll look at that at the end of the session. Underlying all of these applications that the Salesforce One platform gives you is the APIs that the platform provides. It's an extensive set of APIs used internally by Salesforce to build their own applications, and these are also exposed to the users and developer community to develop their own applications on the platform as well. These APIs will help you to communicate with the underlying platform, the actual application servers, that those being the Force.com and Heroku parts of the platform. So let's take a look at these two platforms and see when we would leverage each of them. With Force.com being the original platform from Salesforce, usually it is used for employee, partner, and business customer access. It helps us provide a single view of the customer, and with a rich set of facilities and services like security, configurability, including configurable integration capability, reporting, and many more out-of-the-box services that we can leverage in our applications. Apex and Visualforce and JavaScript are also available to us to build our own applications from scratch if we want to completely customize an application or develop an application from scratch. On the other side, Heroku is designed for high-volume B2C transactional applications. The platform, the Heroku platform, provides highly scalable environments allowing us to add more resources to serve more end users as the demand on the application increases. It has a mixed list of technologies to help us build applications, including Java, Ruby, PHP, and others. And with this highly scalable platform, it is ideal for analytics and number crunching to just manipulate large volumes of data, large transactions as well. As an aside, one example of where we have used Heroku was in a project we delivered for a global telecom that needed a highly scalable and responsive integration layer to integrate with the order management processes and capabilities that we implemented for them on Force.com. And to have that interface with service provisioning platforms outside of Force.com as well, outside of Salesforce. We used Heroku to deliver this capability, and it was an ideal platform to do so. Let's for now concentrate though not on Heroku, but let's look at Force.com and how to use its capabilities to make our lives as application developers on the platform simpler. That's really what we want to be able to do. We want to build applications, but we want to build maintainable applications. We'll start with the basics, I guess. Force.com is an application server, just like any other application servers. The fact that it is easy to use, it is agile and quick to deliver on, does not mean that we should treat it as if we can do anything we want on it whenever we want to. We have to put some controls. Governance around the development environment should be imposed from the start. It shouldn't be an afterthought, as we will repeat over and over again in this presentation. We see so many users of the platform taking part in bad practices when using Force.com. Just because you can configure things into production directly does not mean that you should. And that's a mistake that a lot of people say they don't want to do, but a lot of people actually do. And we see it over and over again when we go into customers and they have existing implementations and we see what they have done, and then we start helping them impose these governance models that will allow them to leverage the platform to its fullest capabilities without running into issues later. So what we'll run through over the next few slides is, what do we mean by environment controls? What do we mean by source code control and how we implement those? What do we mean by deployment and testing automation? Always looking at configuration before customization. And we'll talk also about some of the development, integration, and security considerations that we need to take into account as we build on the platform. So let's start with environments first. Salesforce gives us out-of-the-box capability to leverage its sandbox functionality. We can create out of the production environment that we build, that we purchase from Salesforce, a series of sandboxes. Obviously, it depends on what you've purchased, how many sandboxes you'll get. But in principle, what you need to have a standard environment for development and deployment into production is what we call potentially the production stream of work. And we would have developer sandboxes that you can create as copies of production, one or more of those, depending on how many streams of work that you have. We would then create systems integration sandboxes for testing integrations and testing the system itself. We would then create user acceptance testing environments, UAT environments, pre-production environment based on a full sandbox. And I highly recommend having a full sandbox in your production stream development environment, because it is invaluable to know what will happen to the production environment when we deploy into it, or when we run a particular process into it. And having that full sandbox, which is basically a complete copy of production. Obviously, once you've made that copy, you would need to potentially obfuscate some of the data that you've copied across from production. but then in principle you would have an actual copy of production, including all of the data. And that is an invaluable tool to use in your development lifecycle. And then on the side of that, a training environment for people to train in, potentially including some data from production. And Salesforce again provides us with the capability to do partial data sandboxes that we can leverage from the platform. And finally, production itself. Nothing should be done in production. Everything should be done ahead of production and then pushed into production. That's the principle that you need to follow. Production is really for data manipulation. It is not for development. Source code control. A lot of people take source code control as an afterthought. A lot of customers, we go in and they have developed massive applications, they've developed lots of code, lots of configuration, lots of processes, and then they look at and say, well, now let's go and put it into source code control. It's a bit too late. It's never, I guess, too late. You should always do it if you haven't done it, but it should never be an afterthought. You need to ensure that source code control is at the heart of your implementation of Salesforce. It is a development platform. It's an application server. You wouldn't do it with other platforms. Why would you do it with Salesforce? Just the fact that it is configurable and easy to configure doesn't mean that you should just do things without controls, without governance. You need to consider things like how many developers are working on the platform, how many streams of work that are going to happen at the same time. The repository needs to be the source of truth for all of these streams of work and for all of these developers. It needs to be where people go to understand exactly what has happened to the code and what is the latest working version of the code. And we don't only just put code in the repository. We're not just controlling the code. It is called source code control, but it also will control your configuration, your metadata that you store, your configurable metadata from Salesforce, your workflows, your approval processes, your profiles, and so on. Everything should go into source code control and should be able to reside in there to become the source of the truth that you have. Some applications that people use, I guess, and we use certainly Git and Subversion quite a lot, but certainly others are also available for you to choose from. Deployment and testing automation. Again, quite often we see people not really taking this seriously from the start. They do it as an afterthought, and they initially spend a huge amount of time doing manual deployments. Salesforce provides you lots of ways of doing deployments. You can do deployments from within the platform, from change sets. You can do deployments from Eclipse. You can do deployments from the Ant toolkit. You can do deployments manually as well, right? As in by hand, go in and do deployments for some things, for configuration, obviously, not for code. It should, again, not be an afterthought that you look at automating deployment of code and configuration. And you should always do it from the source code control repository. The source code control repository is your source of truth, not the Salesforce platforms that you build, not the sandboxes that you build. And who knows what people do on those sandboxes some of the time. You need to be in control of what it is that is in the source code control system, have controls over what goes in, what gets committed into it, and then do your deployments from those systems. That is how you can automate your processes and have security around the fact that you know exactly what it is that you're deploying and when you've deployed it, and whether it has worked or not, what the logs that came out of that are, and so on. It is important that we leverage tools that allow us to have that control and have that automation in place. So things that are provided by the Force.com platform in the first place, or by Salesforce in the first place. The Ant build tool, to use that to actually manage that deployment, but then to add on top of that tools that are called continuous integration tools, like, for example, Jenkins, to allow you to control those Ant scripts, control your repository, whether it's Git or Subversion or any others, and be able to manage that deployment process for you and automate it and make it on a regular basis into an environment that is a copy of production, that will allow you to not just do the deployment, but also use tools like Selenium to be able to create an automated regression testing harness and execute that regression tests as well, so that you can actually be secure that not only your code is going to be deployed correctly, but the code that was deployed isn't going to break anything. And all of these things we should look at and think about ahead of time. We shouldn't wait until the last minute to be able to do that. Then moving on to configuration before customization. It is so easy for a set of developers that are let loose on the platform to just say, I know how to build this, I will just go ahead and build it for you. As in, build the code, customize the code, and just go ahead and move on from there. It is very, very important that we ensure that our developers understand the platform, understand the tools that are provided by the platform, understand what is coming out of the box and how to leverage what's coming out of the box. And not just functionality-wise. It is important that those developers understand the business processes that are provided by the platform as well. The applications, sales processes, service processes, marketing processes, and so on. All of these things that are provided to you out of the box, and you should be trying to leverage them before you build on top of them. And certainly, you should never try to override them, to basically simply ignore them and replace them with functionality that you've built. Imagine this functionality provided by Salesforce has been built by a product organization that is developing products for you, that have been tested and have been used by many other customers. And you're saying that you don't want to use it, I'm going to build in its place something very similar. We should definitely not do that. Salesforce provides us with building blocks that we can actually build on, building object models, using the auto-generated CRUD pages that Salesforce provides us out of the box, workflows, sending emails and tasks and field updates, even integration can be done in configuration. Some, and as we will see later, we need to look at what we use, what we leverage, and what we don't leverage, and at what time. Approval processes, record types, to be able to ensure that we give different views of the data to different users. Again, using configuration, not using customization. Using custom settings to ensure that even our configuration is further configurable by custom settings, so that you can actually store flags. Hierarchical custom settings allow you to store flags at the level of the organization, at the level of the profile, and at the level of the user even, to ensure that the application behaves the way you want it to behave in a configurable way for these different groups of or parts of the organization. Leveraging profile security and data sharing model, even leveraging the capability to expose processes and data to partners and customers through the partner and customer communities that Salesforce give you out of the box. There's a huge amount that you can actually gain by using out-of-the-box functionality and then extending that functionality. But there are some exceptions, as I mentioned earlier. There are some exceptions. Take, for example, the workflow integration. It is not always that you will want to use that part of the integration that Salesforce gives you to be able to integrate to other systems, because it does have some limitations. You can, with that integration, you can go out of the system, provide some data to a web service endpoint, and that's the end of it basically for that integration. Then that service basically then needs to know what to do with that data. If it needs to fetch more data, it needs to go into Salesforce and fetch that data using the other APIs that Salesforce provides. But there are many places where that's not sufficient and you need to build your own integration. And we'll look at that in a bit. Field updates is another one. You have to be sure that field updates are, when you're building triggers alongside field updates, and you're updating the records yourself, and you're running triggers on these objects that you're updating, where the fields are, you need to ensure that the recurrence of triggers is not going to get you into trouble. And having field updates sitting in workflow and other fields being updated in the triggers and other processes happening in the triggers might be a confusing thing, and you might be causing extra triggers to be triggered basically, or extra instances or iterations of the same trigger to be triggered without you knowing or without you wanting to. And that's something that we need to take into account. So quite often it might be better not to use the field update in that case, but to use the everything in the trigger. But again, it's horses for courses. You need to choose the right time to use the different tools. But there are lots of tools for you to use in the platform. Development considerations. So what do we need to take into account? We need to ensure that we extend out-of-the-box features. We don't want to replace them. As we just said before, there's lots there for you to use, and we don't want you to replace that functionality. It is not something that we should encourage our developers to do. It is something that they should steer away from all the time, not just most of the time, but all the time. They need to take what's in the platform, understand what's in the platform, and extend it. That is best practice. If they're not doing that, then they're going to be costing the owner of that platform, the customer, they're going to be costing them money in the end. Maintenance and rebuilding for later. Write your code ensuring that it handles bulk transactions. Ensure from the start that you take advantage of the features of the platform, and ensure from the start that you build your transactions to take into account bulk transactions. Your triggers will be firing in bulk regardless of whether you take that into account or not. And so if you don't take it into account, even if you know that for a particular transaction, you're not actually going to be having more than one record, you should nevertheless take that into account and make it bulk. Because what if in the future you decide to upload a large amount of data and you want those triggers to execute? You will not be able to. Your system will fail. You should always take that into account. Take advantage of built-in so-called features, being able to access a lot of information within one select statement, accessing the main records, the master records, and all of its relationships, all of its children records, and get them all into one call. That is best practice, not do one select statement and then another select statement and another select statement to get all of the children. That will run you into trouble with governor limits and will not give you the best way of actually accessing the data from the system. It will not give you the most performant way of accessing data from the system. So in this case, governor limits are actually, you should treat them as if they are your friend, because they do guard you to ensure that you write performant applications. And that's just a small example of where you would be using governor limits to your advantage. Governor limits are not really a limitation. A lot of people see them as a limitation, but they're not really a limitation. Governor limits are there to ensure that everybody writes performant applications and they're not going to infringe on other people's rights on the platform, other customers. And therefore, your developers then are encouraged to build within those limits so that they write applications that perform well, but that doesn't mean that they will not be able to achieve what they need to be able to achieve. As I said before, we in Cloudsense are a product company, and we have built some very innovative, some very complex applications on the platform. Governor limits are not going to stop you from being able to do that if you use them correctly, if you are smart about how you build your functionality. Build your code with security in mind. Make sure that you take security as a first thing that you think about when you're building your application. Who needs to access the data? Who needs to access these resources? Is the data accessible? Is the sharing model set up correctly? And so on. All of that needs to be taken into account. Take care of memory usage on your pages. Don't just load lots of data into your lists and maps and display them on the screen and bind them to the screen, because that will just simply add more to your memory. And if you don't put controls over that, and if you don't use things like paging, then you will run into problems. Again, this is another place where taking the governor limits and using them to your advantage rather than allowing them to be overrun and then causing you problems. We talked about recurring triggers before. I won't repeat that, but that is something that you should certainly take into account, because sometimes processes could run away from you because you don't know exactly when these triggers are happening and why they're happening. Ensure that you are in control of that. And again, use custom settings to make your code configurable. You leverage the custom settings capability to ensure that you do have that capability in mind. And you make your code configurable so that you don't have to, every single time you need to make a small change to allow a certain user to use the system in a particular way, you have to then deploy a new process and deploy new code. You can use and leverage custom settings to allow you to configure your code rather than have to modify it all the time and customize it all the time. And again, develop within the governor limits, with the governor limits in mind. Make them your friend, and you will see that you will not be limited in the functionality that you can deliver, but it will guide your developers to deliver performant applications. Keep that in mind. Integration. Use out-of-the-box outbound workflow messages when you can. If that is a capability that will provide you exactly what you need, then use it. Don't just build an integration class and have that being run basically using code. If you can configure it, then use configuration to do it. Use the generate from WSDL platform service to consume a WSDL and generate a class for you, so that you can actually then use that class interacting with their web service without you having to write the code yourself. Salesforce will generate that code for you. You can consume web services also via HTTP requests. So if the consumption using generate from WSDL doesn't work for whatever reason, because there are some limitations around what type of WSDLs you can actually consume with that functionality, then you're still, again, not limited. You can actually consume that web service using just standard HTTP requests. Again, use the tools that are provided to simplify your job in building things. Configure, extend, and then build on top of that if you really need to. Don't just simply say, I will just go ahead and build it. Test your integrations thoroughly. Do not let it to chance. Integration is where most things go wrong in projects. And it is quite key that we test it thoroughly with all the different cases that we need to test. Don't just say, yes, I can connect to this web service and that's all fine. Test all the different scenarios. Send the exception scenarios as well and make sure that you can handle them correctly. Expose Apex web services where appropriate. You can expose your own web services, not just the Salesforce standard APIs. You can expose your own web services also on the platform. You can write Apex code that you can then expose as a web service and have that other applications from outside call in. Why would you use such a thing? Because you want to impose. You don't want people to just simply access your data using the standard Salesforce APIs, and which they can. But what if what you really want them to do is to access it using certain business logic? Then in that case, you would create your own web services on the platform and provide that capability to the outside world so they can integrate through. Consider the use of middleware as integration layers, and there are, oops, sorry, I pressed the wrong button there. And there are quite a lot, and this is just a select few, I guess. Informatica being one, Cast-Iron being another, TIBCO, Jitterbit. There are lots of them around. And don't forget the standard Salesforce APIs. We did mention them before, but don't forget that they do exist for you there, and you can actually just simply integrate with these systems through these APIs. In fact, a lot of these applications that are listed down the bottom have pre-existing connectors to Salesforce, and you can use them out of the box. So you can actually communicate in and out of Salesforce using those connectors without you having to write your own web services to expose. Security. The platform provides you a huge amount of capability around this at many different levels, and you should be able to leverage that capability to build any security model that you need, from user profiles to organization-wide sharing models, as well as individual sharing models down to the level of the record. You can write your own Apex code to also create your own sharing rules depending on your own criteria, but the system itself allows you to configure quite a lot around sharing rules, even before you get to the point where you think you need to create your own sharing rules in Apex. And you need to take that into account. Don't just go ahead and build your own sharing rules and your own sharing model. Use the out of the box and then extend it if you need to. Don't try to replace it. The role hierarchy plays again another part in the sharing model, in who has access to what data, with inheritance. So that anyone higher up in the hierarchy will inherit what people actually have below them in the hierarchy. And then finally, license types and feature access that you require for those users. Which license should I use? And do they have access to that feature or not? Should I use, for example, customer portal access or customer community access? If I need that user that will participate in that process to have access to the Sales Cloud and to the opportunity process, to the sales process? No, because you can't actually have opportunities exposed on customer communities. These are things that we need to take into account before we start building. We shouldn't assume these things before we start. We need to understand what are the features that we have in the platform as developers, and we need to then ensure that we take that into account when we're designing our application. We shouldn't wait until the last minute and find out, oh, we built an application for customer community, but we can't actually run it in customer community because we included opportunities in it. An example of that. Don't forget your reporting requirements when you're looking at security. Who should have access to what? And do they need to have access just at the transactional level? Or do they even need to have access at the transactional level, but they only need to have access to it at the reporting level? Take that into account from the start. Otherwise, you'll find yourself building applications that look like, you know, they've got brilliant processes, brilliant sort of transactional capabilities, and everyone has access to what they need, and then suddenly the manager doesn't have access to be able to report on anything. And then you have to start putting patches in place to try and give them access from here and give them access from there, and then your system starts being built out in an unmaintainable way. Take these things into account from the start, and you will gain in the end. And finally, the Appexchange. Take advantage of the Appexchange. There are lots and lots of applications that are built on the Appexchange and that are covering business processes that you might want to cover in your business, in your at your customers, if you're building for a customer. And you should look to reuse rather than build any functionality that you're looking at building. You should try to see whether that functionality has already been built for you, whether it's already been built as a product, especially, not just as a process. There are lots of applications that are free, lots of applications that are paid for, and there are different varying sort of levels of complexity provided to you with these processes that are covered. There are certain key things that you should look for. Look to reuse before build, obviously. Look at configurability and not only the features. Don't just say, yes, this covers the features, but can you configure these features? Because things change later, and you need to be able to configure things. You need to be able to extend those things also if you need to. Look for those things, not just the features that the system provides. Look for a product roadmap. Don't just say, yes, it works now, but is it going to build out the features? Make sure that whatever you're investing in actually has a lifetime. Look for product support. And not just product support as in, if the application is failing, can you help us? But also look for the implementation support that you might require to implement that application, depending on the complexity of the application that you're actually investing in. But in any way, whenever you're looking at building, you should always look to see whether somebody else has built it and that they have followed industry standard, and then you can leverage what they've built rather than you having to reinvent the wheel. And finally, consider modifying your business processes to fit in with industry best practice. So if you do have established business processes that you've had for 20 years, but potentially they might not be best practice, and you should look to use this opportunity of change in your systems to improve your business processes. This is not about delivering just a new technology to your users. It is about allowing your business to run more efficiently, and therefore you should take the opportunity to invest in new business processes and following industry best practice. And if it's an opportunity to change your business process and use out-of-the-box tools that provides you industry best practice in business process, then you should try and invest in that. I'll pass on now to Davor to talk to you about the BBC 500 Words competition, a project that we built for them a while ago, and then I'll come back and talk to you a little bit about, well, I'll summarize, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about Cloudsense as well. Davor, you're on mute. Davor?
So, Fuzzy, hi, it's Ian here. I can see that Davor is still in the session, and he seems to have muted himself. So I'm not sure if he's perhaps got a problem of some sort. Hopefully he'll be with us.
Are you able to unmute him?
He is unmuted. He's not muted. So. a little unusual.
Okay, I'll try to carry on with the presentation myself. I'll try to do a good job of his part.
Thanks, Deborah. I'll go back on mute.
Okay. So with the what we wanted to present here is a typical project that we have built, where we built the functionality pretty much all on Force.com. The BBC 500-word competition.
Hello, can you excuse me? Can you
Okay.
hear me now? It seems that
Yes.
I was muted by somebody, and now I'm unmuted, obviously. So
Okay,
I could hear everybody clearly.
Okay, Deborah,
Okay.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me just once again introduce myself. My name is Davor Dubokovic, and I'm Director of Shared Services at Cloudsense. Before I give you some technical details, I would just like to give you an introduction about what this project was about. So BBC 500 Words is basically an annual competition of children writing stories, and each story must be up to 500 words long. So therefore, that's where the competition name comes from. And also children are divided in two age groups. There is an age group of up to 10 years old and age group of between 10 and 13 years old. And so we have children writing and submitting stories at one side, and we also have teachers who are volunteering to judge these stories. And both children and teacher, they submit their information through publicly open website. Usually in the last few competitions, that number has been increasing year by year, but let's say on average there's around 100,000 stories, that means children, and around 8,000 teachers every year. And for every teacher, in order to be obviously objective regarding the story, the one of the most important requests was that teacher must not know the identity of the child, so they even must not be from the same region. So teacher cannot judge the story of the child if they are both from the same region. Competition had it still has its microsite completely integrated into the bbc.co.uk structure. So our solution was based on a Salesforce site, and that was actually one of the challenges which we had, because again, as I just said, this Salesforce functionality, Force.com functionality, had to be basically integrated into the BBC site structure. But for me, at the end, it was actually a real proof how Force.com as technology can be used in a very specific task, which are actually beyond a standard CRM. So beyond this basically front-end capabilities, we also had to implement the full competition lifecycle automation, where after initial data submissions, teachers had to be verified by BBC agents, which would be the users of the system, and we actually build the verification process for them. Also, stories had to be distributed and marked by teachers, and then in a few stages and rounds, the best story would be selected, and the winner would be announced. So also data had to be treated in a very specific way in order to fulfill obviously security and privacy compliances. So some of the key challenges we had on these projects are, first of all, we had to create a bespoke look and feel completely in accordance with the BBC very high standards regarding extensive HTML. And still, as I said before, our front-end solution was based on a Salesforce site. I'll talk about this a little bit later on one of the next slides, but I would just like to number some other key challenges. Because number of stories and teachers is relatively large, and as I already said, some of the primary requirements were to evenly distribute stories to teacher and with certain rules and restrictions which have been forbidding the stories and the teacher to come from the same area. So basically we have been using a bad jobs for that distribution, and we have been monitoring and measuring the ratio between the stories, teachers, and the regions. And then teachers with less than average number of assigned stories would have advantage when the next story had to be assigned to some of them. So basically it's that's also quite interesting proof how forced.com can be used in some quite innovative ways, and how actually advanced algorithms can be used to get certain effects. Also, the teachers have been represented by the contact object, and the stories have been implemented as a custom objects. And in this kind of distribution, which I'm talking about, the stories have been initially assigned to the contact records, which, as I said, represented teachers. And then, because we had quite strict timing of how and when we will be using the portal licenses, portal users which are related to contact, so basically they enable the login to these teachers, have been created at just one very quick moment and activated, and then basically also made the data sharing rule, which enabled that only the users whose contact was assigned to the story in this distribution process can have access to the portal to basically these stories. Another quite big challenge was a large number of email notifications, because we basically lots of this communication was happening actually through the email. So like initial notification that somebody correctly submitted their data to the system, or the email notification that somebody still did not judge all the stories which have been assigned to him. So that basically produced a very large number of emails, and it would not be possible to send those emails using the standard Apex send email method. We had to be slightly innovative there. It's a known thing that the standard Salesforce workflows with email notifications have a much bigger limits regarding email sending than the standard Apex, and therefore we have been using this functionality to basically push this much larger number of email notifications. Usually it would be that, for example, certain a field on a record would be modified, and then that caused the workflow email alert, which was configured in a such way. So also the site had to be the part of the bbc.co.uk subdomain, which is something I'm going to talk about in one of the next slides. So, as already mentioned, one of the strongest requests which we have been asked in this project was that there should not be any difference between the pages which we used for, as I already said, for the data submission, and which have been exposed to the Salesforce sites, and all other pages which are part of the standard BBC structure. So one of the things which we used the BBC's web service called Burlesque, which enabled us to call and use standard elements which are used on any BBC site. So not just R, but just any. So from that system, you can basically get the headers, you can get the footers, you can have some of the standard menus. You can even, on this slide, as you can see, this live radio stream, that's also the widget which you can get from that web service. And some other quite specific web content we have been still using in a Salesforce resources. So again, some of the contents has been got from the BBC, and some of the content was already stored in a Salesforce. Now coming to that bespoke look and feel, the request was not just that we visually have this kind of effect, but also regarding the URL. This microsite had to be on the bbc.co.uk domain, and we have been actually using some quite innovative ways to get that effect. So obviously, in cooperation with BBC, the reverse proxy server was set up on the BBC infrastructure, and basically the page requests have been coming to the BBC domain, and that actually made that URL was visible to the end users. That proxy was then proceeding requests to the Salesforce sites, and then these have been responding with these adequate pages. And during the page request on the Salesforce sites, some URLs had to be rewritten in order to match the structure of the BBC links. Also, some default Salesforce page elements, which are just injected by Salesforce itself by default, had to be basically stripped out, and that was actually the requirement, and that's something which is what BBC actually measured. They have been using the HTML validators, and they have been using their own very strict standards in order to recognize these pages as compliant by their standard. Some other interesting points which I would like to talk about is that because in these kind of situations, when lots of things are happening at the same time, there are always moments of panic, and therefore we wanted to have everything as much automated as possible, so we don't have to do certain things in a last moment. For example, functionality of the site was completely data driven, and it was governed by the custom settings. And so in the custom settings, we had the start, end, date, and time, and start and end date and time of the competition. And therefore, only between these time moments, it was possible to reach the pages which enabled the data submission. Otherwise, the user was also giving a quite nice page which was saying that it's not possible to submit data yet because the competition either didn't start or it already ended. Approval of teachers. Obviously, not everybody who volunteered to judge the story was actually enabled to judge the stories. Teachers, because although anonymous, it's still contact with the content produced by children. So the teachers had to be validated, and we built in a backend as a backend process. We built a process which enabled Salesforce users, which have been coming from the BBC site, to basically validate these teachers, and they have been using some pretty standard elements of Salesforce, like data views, reports, filtering, and obviously the process was working that the data has been propagating through the few stages until it would be filtered, and in this case validated. We also on a high level, just to be able to present the kind of high level stage of the competition, we have been using reports and dashboards, and some of these information have been, for example, how many teachers already marked all their stories, how many teachers did not even start to mark their stories, and that was obviously the alarm sign. So we then had to kind of notify them to start judging these stories, or we had to, in some cases, we had to replace them with the teachers which have been sitting on a kind of bench just for this purpose of replacing teachers who are not doing their story marking. So I would say that for me personally, it was not the biggest project I was doing. It was actually quite a small and nice project, but it was really interesting with so many interesting features, which basically have been going beyond the standard CRM implementation. And for me, it was actually very interesting that basically you can use force.com for these non-standard CRM business processes. Fauzi, over to you.
Thanks, Davor. So just I'll spend a couple of minutes just talking a little bit about Cloudsense, just to give you some background about us, and then I'll summarize and we'll end there. So Cloudsense is a company that started back in 2009. We have grown since then to over 150 people. We are specialists in media and telecoms. That's where our sort of origins are from, but we have extended our reach into many other areas. I won't go through each one of these items on the screen. You can see them there. You can see that our customer satisfaction rating is quite high. We have a large number of certifications within the organization, including technical architect certifications. And we've won many different awards, as you can see here. And here's a list of some of our customers. As you can see, all of them are large customers, including, as we just heard, the BBC and many other large organizations that you can see there. I mentioned before also that Cloudsense is not just a services company. It's not just a consultancy. It is also a products company, and we have developed 3 major applications to help you extend the Salesforce platform or your investment in the Salesforce CRM, providing you a link between the Sales Cloud and the Service Cloud, and allowing you to manage your orders with our advanced order management capability that we provide you as managed application or set of managed applications that provide you with order management capabilities on the platform. We have 3 main applications that are provided. The Cloudsense Media Platform, which is an ad booking system for media organizations that is running on the platform and integrating with ad servers out of the box. We've got Cloudsense Telecoms Platform that allows you to extend your order management and provisioning processes onto the platform and allow you to deliver end-to-end processes from selling all the way to product configuration and CPQ, to order management and delivery processes and orchestrations of those processes, all the way to billing and payment collection, and then all the way to service. And the Commerce Platform, which basically is a version of the same order management platform, but is able to be applied to any industry, not just specific industries like telecoms and media. And obviously, we have quite a large capability of services for implementation, as well as long-term support and flexible services or flexible consulting, as we call it. In summary, just to remind you of some of the key points that we discussed today, I forgot to change the title on that slide. Unfortunately, it's not the integration slide, it's a summary slide. In summary, the key things that we need to take into account are control. Take control of your platform, take control of your environments, of your source code, including your metadata, your configuration metadata. Take control of your deployment and ensure that it's automated, it's not dependent on manual tasks, and make sure that you include in your deployment processes regression testing automation, so that you can actually rely on having this continuous integration with the development process. Configure before you customize. Ensure that you use the features of the platform. Extend those features. Do not try to replace them. You will gain if you do this. If you don't do this, you will lose out in the end. And follow standards. Apply development standards. This is a development platform. It's not just a CRM. It is a full-fledged development platform. It's an application server. Apply standards, development standards. Use governor limits to your advantage. Enforce proper unit testing, not just code coverage. And finally, make sure that you have governance, overall governance over the platform. It's not just anyone can come in and do whatever they like. Make sure that you have governance to ensure that everybody is actually participating in the platform and using the platform to their advantage. However, so that you can maintain the platform, you need these controls in place. Thank you very much for listening. Ian, over to you.
Fawzi, thank you very much. Davor, thank you very much. Fantastic webinar. Great level of detail in there and some fantastic advice. So there are actually no questions currently in the community group. We are a few minutes over the hour, so at this point we'll close. If you do have follow-up questions, please post them in our implementation expertise webinars group. Fawzi and Davor, I'm sure, will be keeping an eye on that for a few days to see if there are any follow-up questions or requests to them. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining. Please give us feedback in the group if you have it, and we'll see you in a month for the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.